Let the liberal meltdowns begin. The polls in New Hampshire are still open for a few more hours, but that's not stopping the usual suspects from thinking the worst of Trump supporters who just want a more prosperous economy. The new attack line is that they want a dictator.
I think that we're naive to think that he's tricking people into picking him and then surprise, he's going to act like a dictator. What he's offering is strongman leadership, the end of politics, the end of elections. And that's what he's selling, and that's what they are very eager to buy.
If you're that voter who thinks that the system is working against you, that Washington has ignored you and Wall Street has swindled you and Hollywood is laughing at you, you want chaos. You want something to sort of shake up the whole system. That was always, from 2015 on, that was the Donald Trump appeal.
Trump is just lying all the time. And the people that believe a liar all the time are crazy. And I can't even understand it. I do not understand why 70-some million people out there accept a constantly lying person.
And not to be outdone, far-left squad leader Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also bashing Trump supporters.
Donald Trump is what you actually get when you want a politician to embody all of like your hopes and dreams and like caricatures of yourself.
Yes.
And Donald Trump affirms insecure men's idea of masculinity.
Yes.
They affirm insecure people's idea of wealth.
Internalized misogyny.
Yeah, insecure white folks' idea of race.
Greg, I want to start with you because this infuriates me. They actually think that we want chaos, as if we don't know they're the ones causing the chaos.
Okay.
Talk to me.
Well, this is a design problem of the industry. You can't get ratings if you operate on the best intentions of other people. So instead of honestly asking why maybe 80 million people, 75, 80 million people might want something that you don't want, they will call them dumb, racist, misogynistic, deplorable, because those people don't see what you see. I don't like Taylor Swift, but I can see why a billion people embrace her music. And when AOC happily psychoanalyzes groups of people, then it's an invitation to return the favor, right? If she can do it, she's saying that people who support Trump are projecting their masculine insecurity. But isn't she saying that because of her own insecurities about her boyfriend's masculinity, right? She must realize how soft and buttery and feminine progressive males are. And it's hard to get horny with a snowflake. So it's why, and I think this is why she is so pro-illegal immigration. She's projecting her secret desires for young, virile men who are coming here in droves, and she's stuck with Pajama Boy, and it's driving her crazy. All these Trump supporters, men, MMA fighters, drives her nuts. And then I want to just say one last comment about Chris Matthews. He's been around a long time, so he has no excuse for having such a monumental blind spot. But surely if he was not on set and you sat him down and contemplated the nature of Trump's popularity, he would get it. But if he got it, then he would never be invited back to those shows. Anybody can explain Trump's popularity, right? He values what most Americans value, which is success, meritocracy, putting America first and then helping others, right? He's also an outsider, and he pisses off the right people. I did that in 10 seconds. If you said that to Chris Matthews, he'd go, oh, I get it. But the moment he gets it, he will be thrown out of the system.
Okay. All right, Jesse. You know, they say that we want fascism and we want democracy to end. I mean, isn't that kind of counterintuitive? And doesn't it kind of indicate what they've done for the last few years?
It sure does. It's kind of a corporate media psyop to make us not talk about the issues. Instead of talking about the issues, they create a stigma around the issue. So you don't go anywhere near the issue. Remember Obamacare, if you didn't like it, you were racist.
Right.
You want a secure border, you're a bigot. If you don't want women playing sports with guys and vice versa, you are a transphobic. So no one wants to be in a cult. No one wants to vote for a dictator, be called a bad person. And so it just scares people away from actually debating the issues. And it kind of works. People come up to me just today, say, Jesse, I can't. They whisper, I'm a big fan. I like Trump, but in my office, work for the medical industry, I can't say it.
Yep.
Because this is what's going on in this country now. And for AOC, I know a little something about insecure men. An insecure man avoids confrontation. And he just lets his enemies build up their power. An insecure man doesn't set boundaries and lets those boundaries be broken. An insecure man is afraid to say no, even to people who he loves, and then watches those people descend into chaos. We are being led by insecure men, and that's why we have people who are hyphenating their last names. And so if the country would just get back to normal manhood, where people were not afraid of offending everybody and just did the right thing because it was the right thing to do, we'd be in great shape.
Okay, Harold, I was at an event last night, and I was having a very heated conversation with a Democrat who told me that Donald Trump is never going to leave office. He wants to be a dictator forever. This is a smart guy. And I said to him, well, then why did he leave last time? You know, when he said, well, because he had to. I mean, what is wrong with people?
I can't speak for that guy, but I'll tell you this. I've never found it, when I was in political office and even outside of it, I don't know how it's valuable to be critical of other people's voters. You can be critical of the candidate and perhaps say the candidate is fooling them and that voters should listen more closely to them. But I don't think it's useful to be critical of voters in any Democrat or Republican. Two, Errol Lewis, who was in the I think he was saying a little something different. At least I heard him saying something different. He was saying in 2016, people voted for Trump because they wanted their lives were chaotic and they didn't mind someone coming in to shake it up. And President Trump did that. I think the question now for voters, as we are now 8 years later from when he was elected in 2016, is that still what voters want? I would encourage the Biden team. I think two things have to happen for an incumbent to win. First and foremost, the economy has to be performing, and people have to feel like their lives are better and that the economic plight in their life is better. If they don't feel it's better, even if the numbers suggest it is, you can't tell someone you're safe, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're financially secure if they don't feel those things. So the president's got to hope that some of those things happen in his favor. Now, if I were in the White House, if I were the campaign team, I would run ads, roll out a line of ads to talk about that and just use the words that President Trump has used. He said he was proud to overturn Roe v. Wade. He said that he would pardon the J6 those convicted on January 6th. These are things he said. These are not things made up. And just let people understand. And then I would play back things that George H.W. Bush played in the campaign against Mike Dukakis. When Mike Dukakis said things, campaigns do it all the time. I would make clear that this is what President Trump has said and what he wants to do. And if he doesn't, maybe we should ask him these things. But criticizing voters, I think, is a terrible, terrible thing to do. It's an un-American thing to do.
Okay, Dana, wrap it up for us.
So I think if you think back to last week, what was the most important thing said in this election so far? It wasn't by a politician. It was by Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan, who is a center-left Democrat who took the opportunity in Davos to tell the left, wow, what you're doing is wrong. Why can't you be at least open-minded to what these people who would vote for Republicans and Trump, what they are thinking, what they're wanting? He was trying to ask them to be a little bit humble and a little bit gracious, and so show a little bit of mercy, and also to maybe look in the mirror and realize that one of the reasons they're so worried is because they think they're going to lose again. It's another reason why I don't think Michelle Obama would get in the race. One, I don't think she's ever going to.
Dana.
I don't think she likes politics. And I don't
read the Cindy Adams op-ed.
What Cindy Adams says, do you think she wants to risk losing to President Trump? No way. The other thing is, what Rachel Maddow said, that Trump wants the end of elections. Well, tonight, you're going to see results in a write-in campaign for the Democrats and Biden, where the DNC has already said that nobody's vote here is going to count, as the judge said in the A block. So who's doing the election interference? This is what I'm asking for: a little grace, a little bit more mercy for everybody, and to humbly listen to people who you might not agree with. And the last thing I'd point out, this is going to be the longest general election campaign in history. If they use all this hyperbole now, I don't know what they're going to say by next week.
Very good point, Dana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.